Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. I hope the lighting's not too dark, but I don't think putting the light on is going to really help me any. But anyway, I hope I find you all well. I hope you've been enjoying the content on the channel. I'm trying to keep up with it, and I'm trying to be, more regular with the videos that I put out. So yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying them, and I am trying my best to get one out every 7 days at least, or maybe 2. That might change some weeks here and there, but I am doing my best, guys. So I just realised I'm kind of matching my curtains. Anyway, I'm going to do the next chapters of Return of the Gods. And then I will be doing Beyond Death's Door in the next video, and then I think I'm going to read a chapter out of a new book, so we can have like a few different books going. Feel free to drop any comments and discussions and stuff about the books, what they say, just anything really. I'm always happy to chat to you guys in the comments, so thank you so much for sharing your time with me. I truly appreciate it. So the next chapter we have is The Great Seduction, chapter 19. So it says, what exactly would happen if the spirit of the goddess took possession of a culture? What would happen if it took possession of America? And then came Ishtar. In American and Western culture of the mid-20th century, sexuality was seen as the sacred dominion of marriage, and marriage as the sacred and lifelong covenant of love between a husband and wife. These values were largely the same as they had been in ancient times at the advent of Christianity. Sex outside of marriage, whether premarital or extramarital, was seen as sin. Divorce was frowned upon. If a woman became pregnant before marriage, she and the child's father were expected to marry. The divorce rate was minuscule, so was the percentage of people living together outside of marriage, as was the rate of children born out of wedlock. Prostitution existed but was legal and confined to the underworld. Pornography was taboo and for the most part kept out of mainstream culture and public view. Even those who broke such standards would, for the most part, keep their behaviour private. American entertainment and popular culture were expected to uphold the same values. Beyond illusion and suggestion, sexual relations were generally not depicted on the movie screen. Hollywood was expected to follow an agreed-upon code of morality as to what could and could not be shown, and it did. Nudity of any kind was forbidden. Any allusion to sex outside of marriage was not to be portrayed in a positive light, and for television screens and parameters were even tighter. And then came Ishtar. The deification of sex. We have seen the dynamic of deification when an individual, nation, or civilization turns away from God, and which is not God will become as God and will assume the aura of godhood. One of those things that are not God is sex. When Israel turned away from God, sex in the form of the goddess Ashtoreth or Ishtar was deified. Sex became a god. Sex thus became an end and goal to be pursued in and of itself. Therefore, it could now be divorced from marriage or any other context and be followed with no regard for context or any other thing. When the spirit of Ishtar came to America, the same dynamics began to replay. Sexuality was deified. It became a god to be pursued as an end in and of itself and without regard to marriage, love, or even a relationship. That which was once the exclusive domain of husband and wife now spilled into the public sphere and popular culture. And so began the progressive severing of sexuality from marriage. As Israel worshipped and served the goddess of sexuality, so now America, indwelled by the same spirit and the same goddess, became increasingly obsessed with sex. The destruction of marriage. Though Ishtar was involved in the ritualized marriage ceremonies of a Mesopotamian religion, and though some of her myths involved a form of marriage, there was also nothing but her that was conducive to marriage. Just the opposite. Her nature and acts, her worship and cult would undermine it. She was never faithful. She was promiscuous. She pursued and seduced lover after lover. She pursued sexual relations apart from marriage and to the detriment of marriage. So the effect of Ishtar's return to modern world was progressive and undermining and weakening of marriage. As sexuality was glorified as an end in of itself, marriage was eroded. As Ishtar has pursued relationship after relationship, so America began doing the same. As the taboo against ending one's marriage began to end, so did marriages. Under the spirit of Ishtar, divorce became an epidemic, and America was filled with broken homes. Passions of the goddess. Ishtar was led by her will and desires. She had no regard for the consequences of her actions. The idea of denying her desires for the sake of covenant was to her an anathema. She sought the immediate fulfillment of every impulse. She was the goddess of instant gratification. So with the return of Ishtar, American and modern culture became consumed with instant gratification. Americans increasingly chose their desires over relationships, over preserving their marriages or entering into them in the first place. A culture of hyper-individualism, soon individual self and self-gratification proved to be toxic to marriage and relationships. As it was Ishtar's nature to choose sexual pleasure and romance over commitment, more and more Americans did likewise. They slept with each other, lived with each other, but did not commit to each other. Marriage as a lifelong covenant was increasingly viewed as a unnecessary constraint. What was once fornication now became premarital relations, and in time the norm. The number of Americans living together without marriage and the number of children born out of wedlock without fathers would skyrocket. Ishtar in Hollywood. The realms of entertainment and popular culture were subject to the same spirit. The codes and standards that had been established to serve as moral hedges were now removed. What was once forbidden, abhorrent, or taboo now filled movie screens, and whereas the television industry once avoided showing married couples in bed, now it regularly portrayed unmarried people in bed and having relations, with multiple partners, and whereas nudity was once never seen in public, it was now displayed on movie screens and piped into American living rooms. If Americans from the 1950s had turned their television sets into what would appear to be the nation's television set years in the future, they would not have been able to possess it. It would have appeared to them as something out of the apocalypse or a dark fever dream. This was now radically... Sorry, guys. Effective. The work of the goddess had been the taboo. Ishtar's nature was to trespass boundaries, transgress convention, and break taboos. So the American culture became possessed by a spirit of transgression, a drive to push the next boundary, to transgress the next convention, to break the next taboo. What was once abhorrent now became a source of pleasure, and it was not only the taking of pleasure in sin, but in the breaking of taboos and the overturning of the next standard. It was the pleasure of defilement and desecration. Not only did Ishtar introduce or promulgate and champion sexual immorality, she sanctified it. She declared it holy. Sexually immoral acts were part of her cult and worship, performed as rites in her temples and shrines. So in the grip of her spirit, the same thing began manifesting in American and Western culture. Sexual immorality was now not only accepted, but treated as sacred. Sanctifying the forbidden. Now it was the former standards and restraints that were seen as sinful, puritanical, repressive, and evil, and the one who opposed the newly sanctified sins or failed to adequately revere them was now treated as something of a heretic, and the opposition to the new morality was something akin to blasphemy. What the spirit of Baal had begun, the spirit of Ashtoreth or Ishtar had taken to another level. The work of each god was to bring about the inversion of civilization. Ishtar had inverted the realm of sexuality. She had taken what was forbidden, unspoken, and taboo, and step by step introduced it into the mainstream culture. The shock of every step would be followed by familiarity and numbness, then toleration, then acceptance, then celebration. At the end of the process, Americans would be championing what they had once forbidden and forbidding what they once had championed. Ishtar's realm was most critical. It was from sexuality that came marriage, family, society, civilization, and life. And so the workings of the goddess would produce the most profound of transformations in America. Western and world civilization, she would alter them beyond recognition. She would alter life itself. And it says, could that which now saturates the world of entertainment, drives major portions of the American economy and the World Wide Web, go back to the mystery contained in the tablets of the ancient Mesopotamia? I think what's interesting as well about this book is it reminds you that for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And this is obviously telling you that the goddess or the demon, or these gods that are behind the way people behave, how we're influenced in the mainstream, the celebrities and everything, they're all part of that machine that influences us to behave or act and do things a certain way. I mean, you only have to look at Instagram. You have influencers, like people are actually paid to influence other people to buy products, or just do certain things. So it's just about being mindful of what source is behind that influence. And it's pretty easy to tell when the Lord's involved and when he isn't. When you have discernment and as you grow in Christ, you will know more and more. I mean, obviously the devil is so sneaky. Satan is a deceiver. He is very sly, so you can still be tricked and fooled by him here and there, because we're not wise to all of his ways. Obviously in the New Age I learned some of his ways, which is what I talk about on this channel, because I can only talk about my personal fight with him and what I've experienced and learned through that, and hopefully to help you guys. So yeah, I don't fear Satan at all. Because I have the Lord, and he can't do anything to me unless the Lord has gave him permission to do it. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, or I've given him legal ground to do it. So it's just being really mindful of what we are doing, whether this is going to open a door to something into our lives, to come in. And it's when we open the door that's where the problem lies. So yeah, it's just trying to be really mindful of what we expose ourselves to. So yes. Right, now we are on chapter 20. We're going to do group 2 into this video, guys. The Sacred Prostitute, this is called. Ishtar was the patron goddess of prostitutes. She was their protector, their encourager, their supporter, their guide, and their matron. From the ladies of the night who walked the streets of the Sumer to the sacred prostitutes who inhabited the shrines and temples of Babylonia. They all looked to Ishtar, prayed to her, worshipped her, and were her servants. Prostitution was part of her cult. Sexual acts attended to her worship and rituals and could be found in her sanctuaries. The temples of Ishtar were famous for their connection to prostitutes and even for the business of prostitution. The connection was intrinsic to the goddess's identity. Sorry guys, that's my washing machine if you can hear that strange noise. The harlot goddess. Ishtar was not only the great benefactor of prostitutes, but her role model. Her obsession with sexuality, her promiscuity, her countless relationships and lovers, all of these served as examples for the ancient Middle Eastern prostitute. In the tablets of Sumer, Ishtar, or her earlier incarnation as Inanna, is described as a Hirimintu or Karkid. The words are commonly translated as prostitute. Some argue that the words can mean prostitute, but not necessarily in every context, but the words appear in descriptions of Ishtar where the context clearly refers to prostitution. Specifically, when it cites the tavern, the place where prostitutes gathered and worked, one ancient hymn says this: "They cannot compete with you, Inanna, Ishtar. As a prostitute you go down to the tavern, and like a ghost who slips in through the window, you enter there." And from another: "You, my lady, dress like one of no repute in a single garment." As an ancient Mesopotamian prostitute could be identified by her jewellery, so too Ishtar. The pearls of a prostitute are placed around your neck. Another ancient tribute to goddess is even more detailed, as it deals with the prizing of her trade. "When I stand against the wall, it is 1 shekel. Another ancient inscription was the goddess saying outright, "I am a prostitute." The sexualization of American culture. The return of Ishtar was the return of the prostitute goddess. It would set in motion a transformation based on the dynamics of her trade as well as her cult of worship. Prostitution takes sexual relations out of the exclusive content of husband and wife and brings them into a larger culture, into the marketplace, the realm of trade and commerce. Likewise, Ishtar's cult of worship took sexuality out of the private realm of marriage covenant and into the public realm of festivals, rituals, and temple worship. So when the spirit of Ishtar returned to Western civilization, it worked toward removing sexuality from the bounds of marriage. Sexuality now moved out of the private realm and into the public realm. What had once been the exclusive possession of husband and wife within the covenant of marriage now became the possession of the larger culture, popular culture, and public life. So American and Western culture became sexualized. Its sexuality had been stolen from the marriage bed. Sexuality was now everywhere and unbridled by the covenant of marriage. The harlot's pay. It was not only that Ishtar's prostitutes would take sexuality out of the marriage bed and into the streets of Sumer and Akkad. They would bring it into the marketplace. They converted it into a commodity to be bought and sold. In prostitution, sex was employed as means of procuring money. So upon her return, not only did the prostitute goddess flood the culture with sexuality, but she increasingly employed it in the marketplace as a commodity. Sex would increasingly be used to procure money on movie screens, in music videos, in magazines, on the internet, and wherever else it could generate money. What the spirit of Ishtar promoted in the cities of Mesopotamia, it was now promoted in America and world culture. Sex was monetized. The pornification of culture. It was not only that sex was used to sell other commodities, but as in Ishtar's ancient craft, sex itself was up for sale. Industries that existed in the shadows now entered the American and Western mainstream and were normalized. Adult magazines, adult clubs, adult movies, adult entertainment increased in numbers and influence. One no longer had to venture into the corners of the shadows of the American life. The shadows were overtaking America. The tablets of ancient Mesopotamia contain inscriptions in which the goddess seeks to tempt her lovers into sexual relations. They will not be quoted from here, as they could be best described as pornographic literature. So as the spirit of the goddess increasingly took hold of American and Western culture, pornographic literature and storylines began entering into the mainstream. As the ancient Mesopotamians read or listened to the pornographic words and stories of Ishtar, Americans now read pornographic literature and watch pornographic movies in theatres and their television sets and on their computer monitors. And as prostitution depersonalized sexuality, so the spirit of prostitute goddess increasingly depersonalized sexuality. So the mother of Eros. Now, newly mainstream sex industry would employ and be known by the world erotic literature, erotic dancers, erotic massagers, erotic movies, erotica. The word erotic comes from the Greek word eros. Eros was the ancient god of the Greeks. The name means desire. Eros was the god of sexual desire and love. Eros was born of Aphrodite. Aphrodite was the Greek incarnation of Ishtar. So behind the name given to describe the deluge that was sweeping over the American and world culture was the pagan god Eros. And behind Eros was Ishtar. Behind it all was Ishtar. Having returned to the modern world, the goddess had given birth to Eros. The images. The worship of Ishtar was not limited to pornographic literature or storylines. It found its most popular expression in imagery. The image of Ishtar as a naked woman could be found all over the ancient Middle East. In terracotta reliefs, royal seals, and clay idols, images of naked women were typical of pagan culture and especially prominent in the worship of Ishtar. Thus, we might expect that the entrance of Ishtar into America and modern culture would bring a revival of naked imagery. And that is exactly what took place. Naked images, particularly those of women, would again permeate Western civilization. In the modern case, it would be known as pornography. In ancient times, Ishtar caused images of naked women to spread throughout the Middle Eastern world in clay, stone, and paint. Now, upon her return, she began causing the same images to permeate the modern world in photographs, films, video clips, and digital imagery. The images and practices that were once characterized the culture of the goddess now characterized the American culture. So the porn goddess. Among the oldest writings in the world history are the sacred hymns to Ishtar and Inanna, in which she is described as a prostitute. The Greek word for writing is graphos. The Greek word for Ishtar's profession, prostitution, is porne. It is from the root writings about a prostitute that we get the word pornography. Thus, by the literal definition of the word, pornography was birthed in the sacred writings of the goddess. And so as the spirit of the prostitute goddess moved upon America, America became filled with pornography, or as it is called in short, porn, meaning in effect the prostitute. American culture, entertainment, and American-produced internet made pornography ubiquitous. It was everywhere. Americans no longer had to go into the red light district of American cities and towns to obtain pornographic materials. American culture had now become a red light district. Ishtar had triumphed. Her effect on America was so great that it had now become the world's leading creator and exporter of pornography. America was now, in fact, producing the majority of the world's pornographic content. It had become the undisputed porn capital of the world. The civilization that had been consecrated at its inception to advancing the gospel and spreading the light of God to the nations was covering the earth with pornography and advancing the agenda of another spirit, that which now controlled it, that of the prostitute goddess. So it says, what do sex, drug and rock and roll, fortune tellers and witchcraft, intoxication, new age movements and the world of the occult have to do with one another? It says they'll all go back to the enchantments of the Mesopotamian goddess. So all of that comes back to this goddess. So yes, guys, I hope you find that informative, and I hope you, as you listen to me read that, you can think about the world today and think, wow, yep, it is all at work before our eyes, and it's our job as mothers and parents in general for the guys, so as mothers and fathers, to protect our children as much as we can from these influences, and also what we bring into our home and what we allow, to be shown in our home. It goes way deep, guys. So thank you so much for listening. Hopefully I will be back with a video from the garden this week, because it is beautiful outside. It's been a really nice few days here in England, which makes a change. So thank you, guys. I will see you all in the next video. Have a lovely, lovely day.